Are we ready to enter the conclave and discuss his new
Yeah.
film? The summary of the film. So this is Conclave. It's the IMDb plot summary. When Cardinal Lawrence is tasked with leading one of the world's most secretive and ancient events, selecting a new pope, he finds himself at the center of a conspiracy that could shake the very foundation of the Catholic Church. This is directed by Edward Berger, starring Ralph Fiennes, Stanley Tucci, and John Lithgow, and also Isabella Rossellini. Yeah, I don't know about you, but I was there at midnight show, Chinese theater, IMAX 3D. I was in my costume. All the conclave heads were there. It was a huge
Wow.
event. Yeah, I got my popcorn bucket. They have the Vatican reconstruction of the Vatican in there. It was huge.
Not the
Um,
Pope hat.
I had the Pope hat, but I had to take it off. Obviously, when
Right.
the movie started, that would have been a little distracting to all my other clave heads out there that were just chopping at the bit for this movie. That was obviously a joke. However, I did go see this yesterday at 10 a.m. At a screen, and it was almost full. And the ticket taker was like, "Why
Wow.
are so many people seeing this movie?" And I'm like, "It's freaking Conclave. Everyone loves the Cardinals." But like, she was like, "What's going on?" And it was like for a 10 a.m. show
Wow,
at the
that's
Grove, it
impressive.
was full. I'll start with my kind of high level take, and then we can discuss Ray Fiennes more particularly. So I actually went into this movie. I probably wouldn't have seen this if it were not for this podcast. Honestly, this was not on my radar. The director directed the All Quiet on the Western Front film from previous year, which I did not enjoy. So I probably would have avoided this movie because he was involved. The trailers didn't look interesting to me. But I really loved this movie. I thought it was just super enjoyable, like pulpy in the right areas, serious in the right areas, incredible acting performances, incredible set design, music. I love the score. I love the sound design. And actually, about halfway through this movie, which we'll get into this more when we kind of get into the film, like I realized, like to me, this seemed to be a big allegory for just the state of Western democracy over the last like 5 to 6 years. I was reading a lot into the last two American presidential elections, the recent elections in France over the summer. Like this seemed to be a direct commentary and reflection on
Hmm.
poor state, I should say, of Western democracy. But at the center of it all, too, Ray Fiennes, I think this might be one of his best performances, if not his best. I'd only seen it once. I mean, this was yesterday, so maybe there's some recency bias here. But he just did a fantastic job holding this whole movie together in a character where, again, he's on the face of it, he's trying to be this like better than everyone else, follow the rules, holier than thou. Not in like an arrogant way, but look, we got to follow the rules. We got to follow the rules. We have this
Right.
process.
I'm not even interested. I'm
I'm
not
not
even into it.
interested. I'm not going to get involved. And yet he's like breaking every rule, sneaking into the dead Pope's room to steal this stuff, and does this Mean Girls thing with the burn book at a certain point in the movie. So it's just interesting that like this guy, who again, like I was saying before, he comes across as someone who's, oh, this guy's going to be a good guy. Then it's Ray Fiennes. He's got a nice face, even despite his mouth thing, I guess. But eventually he ends up being sort of just as political as the rest of the characters in the film. So yeah, high recommend from me, but curious to hear your thoughts and kind of let's dive more into the film.
Yeah, I was really looking forward to this movie ever since I heard it because I heard that it played really well in the film festivals where it debuted. I love the cast. I actually liked the movie that Edward Berger did before, so I was curious to see because it's such a different scale and note from All Quiet on the Western Front. So kind of
Hmm.
curious to see what someone like him would do with this material and a cast like this. And I also find this topic very interesting, I think. This is such an age-old institution. How do you make something that feels relevant to our times today in this set in this world? Not to mention the beauty and everything that comes with it, whether it's costumes and such. So I was really looking forward to it. And to your point, yeah, it delivered. I really enjoyed it. I love how you put it. Like it's not a self-serious movie.
Mm-mm.
It's a thriller, pulpy movie. It's an airport novel kind of movie that's been elevated. It's almost like a movie that was made in the 90s a lot.
Yeah.
Although, if
Hmm.
this were made in the 90s, they will underline, underscore the point that they are making to whatever current allegory. And to me, that's sort of the triumph of the movie. At first, when I saw it a week ago or so. I was like, oh, so what was this all about? Like it felt fun and engaging and interesting and beautiful to look at and kind of pulpy, but what's the point? And as the week went by, like you were saying, the allegories with the current world, the Western civilization, hell, why even go there? Just what happens in our companies and at work. There's politics of this nature where people are playing games of sorts and you can't really judge the book by its cover. That's happening all the time, right? So it's
Hmm.
very prescient. It always will be. But I love that the movie doesn't underline that. You know, it feels kind of nonchalant about that. It's up to you as an audience to kind of draw those connections to your own life or to what's happening in the world. So I love that about this movie. And then the mise en scène, like we talk a lot about on this podcast, like everything comes together really well in every department. But I think the biggest turn of the movie is in the performances, and
Hmm.
everything is kind of in service of that, which I really enjoy. Like they aren't, I mean, there are some great dialogues and scenes, but it's mostly about glances and what is unsaid. And that's where I think the mise en scène really comes to shine, where the music is sort of amping things up or making you wonder what's happening right at the get-go. The music is kind of comical in a
Great.
way.
Yeah, I loved the music a lot.
Yeah, and I was
Yeah.
like, what is happening? It kind of reminded me of May December a little bit, or the beginning
No.
of how it had this kind of this pulpy kind of soap opera music. But then it sort of becomes a lot more involved as you go through it. But this was a good one. Probably the first movie I've seen this year where I was leaned forward in my chair in the
Yeah.
theater.
Yeah, it was one of the best movies I've seen this year so far. I mean, I know we're going into like the end of the year award season part, so
Yeah.
maybe there'll be other surprises like this. But again, for me, it was a surprise. Like I was not anticipating this being so pulpy and enjoyable. Like they really do dial up these thriller elements. It's not just like a stodgy movie of
No,
people sitting in a room talking about Catholic dogma or something. It's not it's the setting is the Catholic Church electing a new pope, but it really isn't about
it could be anywhere.
religion, right? It could be any government doing something. Actually, one other thing that this movie reminded me of a little bit was the movie Death of Stalin, which is
Oh yeah.
more of a comedy and a farce, but a similar thing. Like the leader of the Soviet Union dies, and everyone's trying to position themselves for who's going to be the next, replacement to Stalin. Again, that's more of a comedic tone, whereas this movie was kind of the same thing. The Pope dies, and these cardinals are trying to figure out, okay, how can I be the one, but not make it seem like I'm the one, but like I gotta do these backroom deals, and it's all politics. And I think that is what this movie sort of is saying, and that it's not good or bad, that it's all like politics by definition isn't bad. I know we that phrase is used a lot, especially in like the workplace. Oh, it's so political. But yeah, like
Mm.
everything is political. That's not a good or bad. Politics is not good or bad by definition. It just sort of is what it is. And this movie, I think, is kind of exemplifying that, and that it really just is all just about the politics. The church piece of it, there's some moments I think that we're trying to make potentially some comments on, religion and faith. There's a lot
Right.
of, great things that Ray Fiennes' character says about faith and doubt. And I think those things are really cool, but they don't also apply to religion. I think that can definitely apply to government. I mean, faith and democracy is the same thing. You have to have doubt in that will the people make the right decision, but you have to
Right.
have faith that the process and the whole idea of voting is important in and of itself. And sometimes people make mistakes. Votes are cast in the ways that you might disagree with, and maybe looking back, the people made the wrong decision. But if you believe in the democratic process, eventually, as long as the democratic process is protected, eventually the people could change and correct those past mistakes. I mean, the entire history of the United States is that it's all
Hmm.
bad decisions that are gradually undone over the years, maybe too late, in my opinion, a lot of the times, but eventually the people do make the right
Hmm.
decision. It can just take a lot of time and in the process. And I think that what this movie is sort of reminding you of a little bit, whereas not to just get too pessimistic or, doom pilled as the kids call it about just the state of things. This is how it works. You have to be kind of open to that.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah, going back to Ray Fiennes a little bit, I think what we've been saying, like somebody who's very centered, seductive, attractive, you think they're in the right, but you also know all along that there's something off. That's very much true in this performance, but I think it's in a different key. Like in
Hmm.
all the other movies that we'll cover, that key is often dialed up to evil effect or comedic effect or
Hmm.
zany effect or what have you. This is like so low key, which of course he's done the low key kind of key in other roles, but not in this sort of context of being off, but also the lead of the movie where we are supposed to follow him and supposed to trust him. So the movie's doing a number on you, but so is he doing a number
Hmm.
on you, but also all the other fellow cardinals and cast members. So it's pretty meta in that sense, which I found very interesting. And it was fun to see him be so restrained and just so low key. I'll use that word again. And there's just so much gravitas around that. And he's playing with your allegiances all along, just the way he's playing the Cardinals, which was really fun to see him that. And also he bodies the whole costume
Hmm.
and the whole setup so well that it doesn't feel out of place. It feels like, oh, you've been here.
Right.
That's the other thing. Like great actors are shapeshifters, and he always commits and kind of dissolves in the character. You forget that it's him, but you also know that it's him, which is such a great quality. I think that's sort of my favorite. Yeah, the more I think about it, my favorite leading men or leading ladies are character actors.
Hmm.
This is why I love Meryl so much. Like
Right.
they have this lead charisma that you want to watch them, you can't take your eyes off them, but they're also not just the same person in every movie, but yet you see a little bit of them. It's
Hmm.
just such a indescribable fine thing, and he's able to do that, and this is probably up there.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think in terms of him being the main character in this movie too, and with the persona and things you're talking about, I think his character is meant to be sort of the audience surrogate, or the audience
Yeah,
feels like, these are just squabbling cardinals, and like I'm above all this. Like, why would I have so much passion? Stanley Tucci's character is sort of screaming, "You have to pick a side!" Like he's getting
yeah,
all animated, and John Lithgow is getting animated, and there's the more conservative, Italian cardinal who also is very big in these performances. But Ray
yeah,
Fiennes like, no, 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 I'm even keeled. Like everything's fine. I'm kind of above all this. But in actuality, he's totally not. Like he has to examine himself. Like, you know what? I actually kind of want this. And then he's doing all these different things to sabotage his competition, essentially. Though in his mind, he's telling himself he's doing that because he's meant to be the one holding up the rules and doing what the Pope, would have wanted. Even though in the end of the day, you find out the old Pope is actually playing politics too by bringing in the guy from Afghanistan into the picture and
hmm,
keeping that all secret. And it's like you can't kind of go into this and pretend that you are the one that is the only sort of chaste or just one who's just following the rules. And I think as an audience, you come in and you think, oh yeah, no, I'm the reasonable guy. I care more about the rules, and why would I play politics? And you sort of follow him along on that journey. And at the end, which I don't think we should get in actually to spoilers because there are some pretty big
no,
spoilers in this film, but I think the end is like a huge big shock to Ray Fiennes, and it really tests his entire worldview to like, well, I claimed I was this, and I claim that I'm more on the Stanley Tucci, more liberal side of the church, but like, wow, am I really? Like when it's put to the test, it's easy to say things, but it's very hard to actually act on those things. And I think that's what Ray Fiennes is finding out throughout this entire movie is he's the, oh, I'm just gonna follow the rules guy. Easy to say, but he absolutely doesn't throughout this whole
yeah,
thing. And he becomes
yeah,
even more political in a way than the rest of these cardinals because he's manipulating the entire process by bringing forth the documents on John Lithgow's character, or telling the African cardinal to basically he has to resign,
right,
and telling him that, like, how can you get more manipulative than that? But he
yeah,
tells himself that he's not, and because it's Ray Fiennes, and you again a face that I think you can trust and believe this is a good guy, that you sort of believe it. But then the movie challenged that thing the whole way through, which I think is so what's so brilliant about it, and why I think that also is sort of the I would think maybe commentary. Maybe I'm bringing my own kind of political thoughts into this too, but the commentary of the people in these governments, whether it's American elections or French elections or other elections in Europe in the last couple years, these people that try to kind of play both sides or think that no, like I'm not going to pick a side. I'm the enlightened center and look at me, I'm so great. And that those people are like the biggest frauds of all. And I think because they don't have ideals at all. And actually, in this film, like the priest that I most respect, or the cardinal that I kind of most respected, is the guy who isn't really about him. It's about the people, and it's like all this political stuff is sort of all aside. It's like, well, what is the outside world? We can't just shut them out. Which I love that allegory of sort of the way the set was locking them all in, and they're just in this room.
hmm,
They can't talk about the outside world, even though they're electing a leader for the Catholic Church of all the Catholics around the entire world, and they're forgetting about who they're actually serving, which is the people on the outside, and it's this outsider that actually helps them see that. And this isn't really necessarily spoilers, but I love the moment when they lock all the windows, but at the end of the movie, one of the windows is
yeah,
open, and the breeze kind of comes in, and they all sort of look up, and it's like, oh, wait a second, like we've been too much thinking about ourselves this entire
right,
time, just politicians politicking for the sake of themselves. the outside world is out there. We can't ignore it anymore. We have to let
Let
the
it
what we
in.
think the people would want into our decision. And I thought that was just so brilliantly handled through the sound design of the wind coming in, the light of that window. And I think that is a good message too, that these, governments sometimes just get too, or most of the time, these politicians, these governments get too focused on themselves and their own politic, and
Right.
they forget what the reason they're there is to serve us as the constituents.
Exactly.
And the one guy was the only guy really that was doing that. Even though Ray Fiennes sort of claimed that he was to himself for most of the time, but you're not. You're playing politics just like the rest of these
Exactly.
guys. I thought that
Exactly.
was really cool.
I totally agree. And yeah, it's not even an allegory, like it's just literally what we are living through right
That's
now,
right.
you
Yeah,
know?
yeah, you're right. It's
And
not
it's
an
a good
allegory. Yeah,
reminder, right? Like the media can sort of say that this side of that side, and there's always one side that's sort of touted as the side that's sort of more, inclusive or more this, more that. But you have to really, take each person to task and see what their true motivations are. It
right,
doesn't matter what you're projecting or the fabric that you put on your back. It's about what you stand for
right.
and what are you driving for. And I think Rafe's character is very much that on the
Hmm.
outside you would think that, oh yeah, he's the best, and that changes throughout the movie, and it becomes, he actually, to your point, ends up being the worst of all of them, even
Hmm.
more so than the Italian guy. At least that guy, what
Right.
he's saying.
Exactly.
I
Right.
would rather take that as opposed to somebody who's just so shrouded in all this that you can't even trust. um,
Exactly.
but the brilliance of his performances is that he himself is in turmoil with himself without
Hmm.
even saying anything. There are no grand sort of confessional scenes or breakdown scenes, but it's all, now I'll move to another part of his face. It's all in the forehead, in the eyes.
You looked up there, huh? You
I,
did
I
eventually.
did go up there. It's like all the weight is there,
Hmm.
of him. Because I don't, there is a part of him, like, I'm sure, great actors, they construct backstories and things like that. I'm sure he constructed it for himself that maybe at one point he was righteous. Maybe he did want what's right for the people. And over time, that thing has sort of just changed and diminished. So it's not totally gone, it's still there, but
Hmm.
there are all these other forces that are pulling him, and you see that happen throughout the movie, that he almost looks a little bit different at the end of the movie than
He
he did from the
does.
beginning, which is
Hmm.
so brilliant. I will say, you won't spoil it, but the whole thing at the end, it is a little bit on the nose and maybe even comical,
Mm-hmm.
that it sort of, to be honest, took me out of the movie a little bit. And this is why the movie for me came from, like, really, really good to, I mean, I still really like it and really
Hmm.
enjoy it, but it sort of just came down a little bit because that just felt like so, I don't know, like the pulp
Trashy,
sort of,
pulpy. Yeah.
it became a little much with
Yeah.
that whole reveal at the end.
Which that's based on a book, and they
Yeah.
dialed the reveal back to not be as extreme as what they do in the book. Apparently, I looked that up because I was like, is this the ending in the book? Like, I'm surprised. Because yeah, that was definitely a moment of like, oh my God, like, wait, what's going on? Like the tone of the movie seems to shift a
Yeah.
lot into something else. But then when I was thinking back on it, the whole movie kind of has that tone because
Yeah. The whole
of
movie
these
has the
amazing
tone.
performances, and especially
Yeah.
the way that the director handles this stuff. They're like elevating like a dime store novel or airport paperback, and then the plot sort of catches up with that, and they're like, oh, okay, yeah, that right, this movie is that, so I'll kind of give it that. But it definitely at first was like, wait a
It's
second, is this whole
silly.
movie just kind of silly? But again, I think a lot of it, there's some messages that you can say back onto
Yeah.
to the rest of the film around, like, it's the other issues that some of these other cardinals had were all about things that they did and not who they were. And I think that is an important message too. Like John
Mhm.
Lithgow, it's like he did bad things, and same thing with the African priest who had to step, or the
Mhm.
cardinal, sorry, I'm getting these, apologies to the Catholics out there, so maybe I'm misassigning some of these folks, but these are flaws that they were in their actions, right, as opposed to just a person sort of existing. And I don't know, I think it worked for me the more I thought about it, even though initially I was like, wait a second, like, is this movie just turning into something super silly, I guess is the best way to put it. But I think they
Yeah.
handled it well, and I also think that scene is some of Ray Fiennes' in terms of the movie, that reveal and how his reaction to that as a character, I think was one of his strongest moments, because it is really putting his entire ideology
Mhm.
at test. And then also that thing of like, wait, I just played politics and like maybe I should have played politics actually even more to try to like correct this because like what else is going to happen? Like they're thinking about the political ramifications and everything instead of where he tried to. I feel like his character learned by the end that piece of it we're forgetting about the people and who we're here to
Right.
serve and what their the Catholic parishioners out there think and what they would want. And then he reverts back to like, wait a second, like actually no, maybe it is important to think about all this political stuff, but then it's fine. Like I saw at least in him this whole sort of like he went through the whole movie in his head again about everything that had just happened, and I thought that was a great job of what Rafe was able to do. And I think the best his my favorite scene of his in the movie was that at the end when he's talking to the new pope and just their scene together was like oh my gosh, like not only
Crazy.
shocking and silly because of the plot kind of stuff, but his performance I thought was excellent.
And
Just
that's
was
what
impressed with
elevates it, right? Like it's
it.
pulpy and silly, but it's grounded in like amazing, fully rounded, deep, complex performances led by him and
Hmm.
all the departments in service of that. And
Oh yeah.
it's a treat.
High recommend this movie. It's a big crowd pleaser, to be honest. Like
Yeah.
I think
I
this
think
plays,
everybody's gonna like this, no matter who
yeah,
you are.
yeah. My audience, which was a mix of older people and younger people, that my full audience at 10 a.m. yesterday, everyone seemed to really like it. They, were gasping at the right moments and
Mhm.
laughing at the moments that were meant to be kind of laughed to. So I think it was a hit in my audience of all the conclave heads in their costumes. So
Same.
hi there, it's Alex. If you like the review and discussion Karan and I just had, make sure you subscribe to our channel, Movies That Shaped Us, to get full episodes. Every other Wednesday, Karan and I review a new release and then discuss 6 other movies made by that film's actor or director and how they shaped us. Subscribe right now or follow our podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts via the link in the description below. Hope you join us for the journey.